Hello there, fellow Anglophiles and lovers of the strange and unusual. Today we have a truly bizarre tale for you. Did you know it's illegal to carry a salmon suspiciously in England? Yes, you heard that right. It sounds like something out of a Monty Python sketch, but it's a real law. Yes, that's a real law. And it's not just a quirky old rule that's been forgotten, it's still on the books today. It's one of those wonderfully weird English laws that makes you scratch your head and say, wait, what? How did this even come to be? Buckle up because we're about to dive deep into the wonderfully wacky world of weird English laws, and trust me, there are plenty of them. First up, let's talk about the Salmon Act of 1986. This piece of legislation was actually created to protect salmon stocks in the UK. This gem of legislation states that it's an offense to handle salmon in suspicious circumstances. But what does that even mean? Now, you might be thinking, what on earth constitutes suspicious circumstances when it comes to a fish? Is it the way you hold it, the time of day, the location? And that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The law is intentionally vague, which leaves a lot of room for interpretation. The law itself is a bit vague on the specifics. It doesn't give a clear definition of what suspicious means in this context. It's left up to the interpretation of the bobbies on the beat. They have to decide if your salmon handling behavior is fishy enough to warrant attention. So if you find yourself walking down a dark alleyway at 3 a.m. clutching a salmon, don't be surprised if you get a few funny looks, and maybe even a visit from the local constabulary. But why was this law created in the first place? Well, it turns out that it was part of a broader effort to combat illegal fishing and poaching. The government wanted to make sure that salmon populations were protected, and they needed a way to crack down on people who were catching and selling fish illegally. By making it illegal to handle salmon in suspicious circumstances, they gave law enforcement a tool to stop and question people who might be involved in illegal activities. So while it might seem like a silly law, it actually has a serious purpose behind it. It's all about protecting the environment and ensuring that fish populations remain healthy. Next time you're at a fish market or enjoying a delicious salmon dinner, take a moment to appreciate the strange and wonderful laws that help keep our world in balance. And remember, if you ever find yourself in England with a salmon, make sure you handle it with care. You never know who might be watching. Thanks for joining us on this quirky journey through English law. Stay curious and keep exploring the strange and unusual. Next on our whirlwind tour of weird English laws, we have a real blast from the past. Believe it or not, it's still illegal to wear a full suit of armor in the Houses of Parliament. This law dates back to the 14th century and was put in place by King Edward II. Apparently, he wasn't a big fan of his knights showing up to legislative sessions fully kitted out for battle. Can't say I blame him. Imagine the scene, members of Parliament in their dapper suits, debating the finer points of Brexit, when suddenly Sir Reginald the Bold bursts in, clanking and clanging, demanding better chainmail benefits for the kingdom. It's a hilarious image, but it does make you wonder about the practicality of this law in the 21st century. I mean, how many people do we really know who own a full suit of armor these days? And wouldn't it be incredibly difficult to sneak a broadsword past parliamentary security? Just picture the scene at the security checkpoint. The metal detector would go off like a Christmas tree, and the poor security guards would be left scratching their heads, trying to figure out how to pat down a knight in full armor. But let's take a step back and think about why this law was put in place. In the 14th century, England was a land of knights and battles, where disputes were often settled with swords rather than words. King Edward II likely saw the need to maintain order and decorum in his court, ensuring that the legislative process was not disrupted by the threat of violence. Fast forward to today, and the Houses of Parliament are a place of debate and diplomacy, where words are the weapons of choice. While the image of a knight in shining armor might be a romantic one, it's clear that the practicalities of modern governance have moved far beyond the need for such a law. So while it might be fun to imagine a world where knights still roam the halls of Parliament, it's safe to say that this ancient law is more of a historical curiosity than a practical concern. And who knows? Maybe one day this law will be officially repealed and we'll be left with just the stories of a time when knights and lawmakers shared the same space. Until then, it's just another fascinating chapter in the quirky history of English law. Now let's talk about love, or rather, the lack thereof. In the Victorian era, the British were known for their stiff upper lips and even stiffer social etiquette. The era was marked by a strict moral code and a rigid class system that dictated every aspect of life, including romance. And nowhere was this more evident than in their train stations. These bustling hubs of activity were not just places of transit, but also microcosms of Victorian society, where every action was scrutinized. You see, back in the day, kissing at train stations was strictly prohibited. The Victorians had a peculiar way of showing their affection, or rather, not showing it at all. The reason? Well, it seems the Victorians believed that public displays of affection were simply not the done thing. They valued decorum and propriety above all else, and any deviation from this was met with disapproval. They were worried about all the steamy farewells and passionate reunions causing a right royal ruckus on the platforms. Imagine the chaos if every couple decided to have a tearful, lingering goodbye or a joyous, exuberant reunion right there in public. So they slapped a big, fat, no kissing sign on their train stations and called it a day. These signs were a stark reminder of the societal norms that governed every aspect of life, even something as personal as a kiss. Of course, these days you're more likely to get run over by a businessman late for his commute than reprimanded for stealing a quick peck on the cheek with your sweetheart. Times have changed, and so have our attitudes towards public displays of affection. But still, the next time you're at a train station, take a moment to appreciate the ghosts of Victorian prudishness that still linger in the air. These remnants of a bygone era serve as a fascinating glimpse into the past, reminding us of how far we've come in our expressions of love and affection. The Victorian era may have been a time of strict social codes and repressed emotions, but it was also a time of deep, unspoken connections. Couples found ways to express their love in subtle, meaningful gestures, a stolen glance, a brief touch of the hand, or a shared moment of silence. Today, we have the freedom to express our love openly and without fear of societal judgment. But perhaps we can still learn something from the Victorians about the power of subtlety and the beauty of understated romance. So whether you're saying goodbye at a train station or simply walking hand in hand through a park, remember that love transcends time and place. And sometimes, the most powerful expressions of love are the ones that are felt rather than seen. Finally, let's talk about our furry, feathered, and scaled friends. England has some pretty peculiar laws when it comes to animals, particularly those of the royal variety. Did you know that it's technically illegal to mate your pet with a royal pet without permission from the Queen, or King as it may be these days? Yes, you read that right. It seems the Crown takes the lineage of its pets very seriously. So, if you had your heart set on your Labrador Retriever producing a litter of royal corgi puppies, you might need to get the monarch's blessing first. It's all in good fun, of course. Or is it? But it does beg the question, what other bizarre animal laws are lurking in the dusty annals of British law books? Only time will tell. More than just a laugh, the importance of understanding legal history. Now I know what you're thinking. John, these laws are completely bonkers. And you're not wrong, they are utterly ridiculous. But here's the thing about these seemingly absurd laws. They offer a fascinating glimpse into the history of England and the evolution of its legal system. Take the Salmon Act, for instance. It might seem absurd to criminalize carrying a fish in a suspicious manner, but this law was enacted to combat illegal fishing and protect salmon populations. It reflects a time when poaching was a serious concern, and lawmakers were trying to find creative ways to address it. The quirks of common law. The law prohibiting armor in Parliament might seem like an anachronism, a relic of a bygone era, but it highlights a key aspect of the English legal system, common law. Unlike legal systems based solely on written codes, common law evolves over time through judicial precedents and interpretations. This means that even ancient laws can remain on the books unless explicitly repealed or overturned. The no-kissing rule at train stations, though largely unenforced today, reflects the social norms and values of Victorian England. It shows how laws can be shaped by cultural attitudes and anxieties. In this case, the Victorians' desire for order and decorum extended even to the emotional displays of their citizenry. The evolution of law in an ever-changing world. And what about that royal pet mating law? Well, it might seem like a bizarre quirk of royal prerogative, but it underscores the historical significance and symbolic importance attached to the monarchy and everything associated with it. Even royal pets are seen as representing the crown and therefore subject to certain rules and regulations. These weird English laws, as amusing as they may seem, remind us that law is not a static, immutable set of rules. It's a living, breathing entity that reflects the values, beliefs, and historical circumstances of the society it governs. Are these laws still relevant? So are these laws still relevant in the 21st century? Probably not. Would you be arrested for kissing your partner goodbye at Paddington Station? Highly unlikely. Would you be thrown in the Tower of London for attempting to breed your pug with a royal corgi? I certainly hope not. These laws might seem absurd and outdated, but they add a certain charm to the English legal landscape. They remind us that even in a world obsessed with modernity, there's still room for a bit of historical quirkiness. Share your thoughts. Now it's your turn. What do you think of these weird English laws? Do you have any strange or funny laws in your own country? Share your thoughts and legal oddities in the comments below. Let's have a good laugh and learn something new about the wonderful world of law and history. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell, and like the video for more interesting content.